Live from the KUDZUKIAN studios in Memphis, Tennessee, this is Artivism with your host, Linda Steele.
Hi, I'm Linda Steele, and welcome to Artivism, where I speak to artists, creatives, and change makers who are working at the intersection of arts, culture, and social activism. Today's guest is culinary artist Eli Townsend. Hi, Eli. How are you?
Hello, Linda. I'm well. How about yourself?
I'm great, thank you. I just want everyone to know a little bit about who you are, who Eli Townsend is, and a little bit about your art and creativity. Could you share a little bit of your story with us?
Sure. As you said, I am Eli, originally Elijah Townsend. We'll talk about that later. I am a chef and culinary artist, a native Memphian. I love 901 and a graduate of Fraser High School, and food is my life and my passion. I started cooking probably about 8 years old, so it's been a part of my life. And when I look back in retrospect, it's been a big part of my family. Not so much as food, but hospitality and service to others. And so once I began to accept that in my life and my path and my journey, I began to see a different outlet and a different expression for food for myself.
Okay. Now, tell us a little bit about how you got into food in terms of the courses you needed to take, any types of apprenticeship programs. Tell us how Chef Eli got into this.
Well, like I said, I started when I was about 8 with the desire to want to learn how to cook. And but I didn't really pick it up as an adult. I originally thought I was going to be a singer.
Okay.
But I soon realized that that was my mom's dream and not my dream. And so I actually was working for an insurance company in Nashville, Tennessee. And my boss at the time made me the hospitality manager of our department. And I would go to meetings for the corporation and stand in behalf of our department, as well as any type of birthday celebration we had. And one day we were having a one-on-one, and she called me in and she was like, you know, your numbers look good. You're a great employee, but I just want to say something to you. She says, this isn't what you should be doing. And I was like, okay. She says, you should be in food. And so she even went further, as she had a brochure with some classes that I could take at the local technical college. And she really encouraged me to pursue that. And so I did follow her advice, and I took the classes, and I ended up working under a chef at this, she had a catering company, but she was opening this little pancake house. And so I applied to work there, and I got the job. She started me out as a dishwasher.
Whoa.
Yes, I hate dishes to this very day. And so we began, and I worked as the dishwasher. Within about 3 weeks to a month, I was promoted to the kitchen manager. And so I began to work very closely with her. Her name is, it's really hard on the tongue, but it's Chef Penelope Faulkner. And so she really took me under her wings and guided me. And when I became the kitchen manager, one day, the front of the house manager, we had this compote that we used to put on the pancakes. And so, but unbeknownst to me before then, and no culinary knowledge, I was walking around calling it compost. And so the front of the house manager, she pulls me outside and we smoke a cigarette together. She says, do you know, I hope I can say this word. She says, do you know you're asking people where the is? I said, oh, I didn't know that. And so that for me made me want to get more knowledge. So I began at that time teaching myself knife skills, learning different things about different cuisines. And I've always been the ant that could and can't. And so pretty ambitious. And I immediately started wanting to have my own business. At that time, it was called The Desired Affair. And so I worked for Kroger's at night in the bakery. I did the overnight shift. And then during the day, I would do lunches and catering for people. And so I did that for a while, and then I moved back to Memphis, and that's when they opened the culinary school out on Germantown Parkway. And so I began working there, and I was offered an opportunity through this company called Wade & Company Catering. Then now they manage the Tower Center out on Poplar Avenue. And so that's kind of how food unfolded and really began to become interested in my life. I credit a lot to Wade Hartsfield today because he opened my eyes to a world of food that I'd never experienced before.
And who is he for me and our listeners?
Well, he is the owner and proprietor of the Tower Center. I think it's at 5050 Poplar. It's the building where you can see 360 degrees around. He had a boutique catering company at the time called Wade & Company Catering, and he just really trusted me. And he guided me in a direction that really has a lot to do with the man and the chef that I am today. I remember the first party, the big party that we had. You know, I think opportunity is always there, but you have to really be focused and present to seize the opportunity. I was just an assistant at the time, and the guy who was my boss, he was a little lackadaisy about his job, and I saw an opportunity. And so we actually opened the University of Memphis Law School downtown. When it first opened, we were the primary caterer. I think it was over 2,000 people.
Wow.
And he saw my initiative and my drive, and he made me responsible for a lot of that, and that's how I began to really step into my role as a chef.
Wow, this is great. So on Artivism, we get a chance to really hear from people like Chef Eli. We get to hear from artists and other creatives who are really working at the intersection of art, creativity, and social activism. And these are the kind of stories that you hear on Artivism. We're sponsored by the KUDZUKIAN Network, and I'm your host, Linda Steele. I'm talking to Chef Eli Townsend. Chef Eli, I happened to see very recently an interview that you did on Facebook Live, and I would love it if you would share that story with our listeners on Artivism, because I thought it was fantastic.
Sure.
You talked a little bit more about being a child and food and the libraries and that whole intersection. Can you share that with us right now?
Sure. I was in the summer going to the from the 4th grade to the 5th grade, and I lived in Fraser. I come from a single parent home, so there were a lot of things that I could have got into that summer, but somehow I decided to step on the bookmobile one day, and I decided to check out cookbooks, which the first time I checked out, they only had 2 cookbooks. And so I checked those cookbooks out, and that's really where my journey began. That summer, I believe I checked out about 50 cookbooks.
Wow.
And there was a prize for a bike. And I actually won the prize, but I couldn't ride a bike at the time. So my brother, he took the bike and he split the bike up and sold it for parts. But that was where my journey began, and where my mom really began to pay attention that it was something that I wanted to do. At first, it was not welcomed at all. For a single mom, she was just trying to put food on the table. And here I was, unbeknownst to her, while she was at work, because my mom worked and she went to cosmetology school. And so the first time I remember, it was a disaster. I tried to make fried chicken and spaghetti. It didn't turn out good at all. She was very upset with me, and so were my brothers and sisters, because she let us believe up until the last moment that we were going to have to eat that crap. And so that's kind of how my journey began. And it was something that allowed me to express myself creatively. I was considered an eccentric kid, and so I didn't have really very many friends during that time. My sister, to this day, she still is my best friend, so she was really my only friend at the time. And so cooking was a great outlet to me to express myself and find something that I was interested in.
Thank you, Chef Eli. You're listening to Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network, and I'm your host, Linda Steele, and I'm talking to culinary artist, Chef Eli Townsend.
Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
KUDZUKIAN
Riffin' on Jazz.
This next gentleman we're talking about has an unforgettable voice.
My sugar is so refined.
Jazz was the happiest. Now,
Since
Calloway
when?
went to my school.
Oh, really?
Yes, he's not an alum because he didn't graduate. He had some gigs to do.
Riffin' on Jazz on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
You're listening to Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network, and I'm your host, Linda Steele. Today's guest is culinary artist, Chef Eli Townsend. We've been talking about his motivation and inspiration for a career in food, and what I thought was so fantastic, you parents out there to listen, is that Eli really saw this at a very young age. And food became his way of a creative outlet. And I think that's so important. And I want to talk more about the social activism part of your work, which I think is really fascinating. Can you tell us a little bit about your work in the community of Binghampton and help people understand a little bit about that community and the work you did for so long in Binghampton?
Sure. I'm fortunate to still be in the community, just under a different umbrella. My journey with the community and social activism, it began with Caritas Village about, I guess, going on 3 years now. It was a Friday evening. A friend of mine, she sent me a text and said, "Hey, you think you'd want to work for a nonprofit cooking?" And I was like, I don't know. And so I told her to send me the information, and she did. And so I looked over the information, and I told her I would be willing to have a conversation with the executive director and founder, Oni Johns. And so she called me about 9 p.m. on a Friday night, which I thought was a little unorthodox, but I took the call anyway. And so we ended up having a conversation for about 2 hours. And I was really fascinated with the work that they were doing. And
tell the listeners a little bit more about what Caritas Village does.
Okay.
In Binghampton.
Caritas Village is a cultural arts community center, and its mission is to provide a positive alternative to street corners to neighborhood children and to build bridges of love and trust between those who are made poor and those who are rich. And so how they do that is they have several programs that are really backed by art, be it culinary arts, visual arts, music, dance. And so they try to impact this community through this outlet. It is really a great organization, and it's the first time that I was able to be a part of something that was larger than myself that impacted a community. I can honestly say up until that point, I'd never really belonged to a community. As an adult, I lived places, but I never was fully engaged with my neighbors. And so at first, it was a struggle for me because I come from the world of food where everything is just based off of skill, and the compassion and the humanitarian aspect is non-existent. And so it was a shift for me at first because I was just there to get a job done, but I quickly realized that it was more than just a job. It was about really being engaged and being present so that people could have an outlet as to express themselves, as well as to simply just provide meals for people who couldn't even afford to feed themselves. You know, I was skeptical because I was like, how does this work? But amazingly, it works. And the relationships that I was able to build with my community members, I still hold some of those relationships to this very day. They're very important people in my life. And so the biggest thing I took away from that experience is learning to meet people where they are, and learning to, if in that moment I have something to offer them, to leave them better than whence they came. And so I think that's the biggest thing I took from working at Caritas Village.
Now, at Caritas and in Binghampton, it's a very special community, not only here in Memphis and in Tennessee, but really, I would think nationally. Can you tell us a little bit more about the makeup of Binghampton, the people, where they're coming from? They're all not from the United States, right?
Believe it or not, it is a very diverse neighborhood. The last I was told, there's approximately 23 different ethnicities in the Binghampton radius, and which was a challenge for me at first too. I accredit Caritas to me learning kitchen Spanish because one of my employees, she was from Honduras, and it's just that kind of place where you meet people from all walks of life, and we have the commonality of wanting the same things and learning that people, as much as we think we're different, we're the same. I had the pleasure of having an extensive relationship with some of the refugees from different countries and learning about their food and their culture. And we've even had moments where we've had the opportunity to cook together. And although there's a language barrier, through food, we speak the same language.
And this is so fascinating. And these are the types of conversations we get to have here on Artivism. We get to talk about food and how food becomes equity and how food is actually part of social change and making an impact on a community. You're listening to Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network, and I'm your host, Linda Steele. I've been talking to Chef Elijah Townsend on Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network, and we've been talking about Binghampton and the diverse community and how many different cultures and languages that are being spoken here in the Binghampton community, and how food is being used really as leveling the playing field. So the kinds of subjects we're getting into for our listeners, we're talking about food justice, food deserts, food as equity, and the culinary arts. This is all exciting, and I really love one way Elijah Townsend has really put it all together, and that's at Artist Campaign School. Can you tell us a little bit about Artist Campaign School and your experience?
Yes. When I started this journey with Caritas, the purpose, the reason why I was in a moment where I was seeking something more. I believe that we were all put here to serve others, and I wanted to connect my passion with something greater than myself. And so I began this journey with Caritas, and then I had an amazing opportunity through Linda Steele with the ArtUp Fellowship, and I was able to go to artist campaign schools where it showed how artists really have an impact on social change and social justice. And that was eye-opening for me because, before this whole journey, I never really looked at my cooking as art. It was
That's
just
amazing.
It was something that I loved to do, and I was very passionate about it. But the more I got involved and the more I learned about how it could impact people's lives, I began to see it through those eyes as well. And so Artist Campaign School was really good for me because I met people from all over the country who we all had the same vision and we had the same dream, and it was to make our communities better in whatever way we could through our gifts and talents. And that's what Artist Campaign School is. I was able to meet people who, stood next to President Obama, and just all of these impactful people that were there to serve us so that we could go back to our prospective communities to serve others.
And listeners, you are listening to Elijah Townsend, culinary artist, food activist on Artivism, sponsored by the KUDZUKIAN Network. And I'm your host, Linda Steele.
Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network. KUDZUKIAN!
You're listening to Artivism. Artivism features conversations with artists, creatives, and citizens working at the intersection of art and social activism. And I'm Linda Steele, your host. I'm a grant maker, change maker, social venture capitalist, and I invest in individuals and projects that use the arts as a vehicle for social change.
Hey, this is your guy, DC, Funky Politics. We're back. A brand new season, brand new shows, brand new guests. We're going to do it just right here on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Hi, you're listening to Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network, and I'm your host, Linda Steele, and I've been having a fascinating conversation with culinary artist, food social activist, Chef Elijah Townsend. And if you've missed any of this, you're going to want to find us because this has been a fascinating conversation. So you can find Artivism on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or TuneIn app or YouTube. But just search for us on these or any of your podcast providers because you're going to want to hear this from the beginning. Hi, Eli.
Hi, Linda.
Now, we've been having this fascinating conversation about Artist Campaign School and your work there and really how everything came together with food and social activism. And so everyone knows who's been listening to this from the beginning that you've been working with food for a while now. But what people don't know, what I know, is that you are really a Renaissance man, and because you've studied some more art forms. Can you tell us a little bit more about the other art forms you've studied?
Yes. I originally started out in college as a musical theater major. Mm-hmm. And I worked for the Theater of Memphis on their show wagon troupe for an entire year. And I have an extensive background in music. I was a part of the world-renowned Russ College a cappella choir led by Zebedee Reynolds-Jones. And so that's pretty much what I do outside of that.
Wow. So I know you're not shy.
Mm-hmm. So. I'm not.
So can you share a little bit of that musical theater background with our listeners?
Sure, and I'm going to sing one of my favorite songs. It used to be sang at the Sunset Symphony every year here at the end of Memphis in May, just a little bit. There's an old man called the Mississippi. That's the old man that I wants to be. What does he care if the world's got trouble? What does he care if the land is free?
Thank you. And for those of us who don't know, tell us a little bit about what that was from.
That was from the musical Showboats, and Paul Robeson was the first man to sing that.
And it was called
Old Man River.
So thank you very much. You're listening to Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network, and I'm your host, Linda Steele, and I'm talking to Renaissance man, culinary artist, Chef Elijah Townsend. Eli, we're going to talk about some extra things now. I wanted to make sure about everybody knows what you're up to. Okay. We talked about your beginnings as a child and cooking, and we talked about school and even your musical theater background. But what's Elijah Townsend up to today?
Well, because of my fellowship with ArtUp, and I'd like to take a moment and opportunity to thank you, because before then I really never knew how to monetize my gifts and talents to work for myself, and so that I could appreciate and value my worth for myself. And so because of my fellowship with ArtUp, it really led me in that direction to work for myself and established Chef Eli's Table as my own business. And it afforded me the opportunity to work with other partners in the Binghampton community. And now, I would have never guessed it, but I'm teaching culinary arts to refugee entrepreneurs.
Fantastic.
And so that's what I'm doing now, and I'm really excited about that. It's a different aspect of food, but it still keeps me in the path of using my gifts and talents for and servicing others. I'm also excited to be moving into the artist's loft space on Main Street, and I'm going to be launching a new project as soon as I get in there. And it's going to be a series of monthly dinners with people from different walks of life. And we're just going to sit down and have dinner and discuss issues that impact our communities here in Memphis. And it's going to be called At the Table. And so those are the things that I'm currently working on now.
Fantastic. And when you talked about this new community, that is the South Main Art Space Lofts.
Yes.
And it's a Memphis project of a national real estate developer specializing in building artist communities called Art Space. And you mentioned ArtUp. And ArtUp, as many of our listeners know, Artivism is part of ArtUp. And what we do is we invest in creative social entrepreneurs like Chef Eli and help them to realize their dreams of owning their own business and becoming an entrepreneur. How can our listeners reach you? I know you work all over the country. And so if they're interested in catering their event or coming even to speak to a group about food justice and social activism, how do they reach you?
Sure, you can reach me. My email address is chefelistable@gmail.com. You can reach me on all social media outlets at Chef Eli's Table, as well as Elijah Townsend. And I we'll look forward to speaking, cooking, singing, whatever I need to do.
Thank you so much, Eli. And of course, in the next month or so, people can always reach both of us by coming down to South Main and visiting us at the South Main Art Space Lofts. You're listening to Artivism on the KUDZUKIAN Network, and I'm your host, Linda Steele, and it's been my pleasure speaking to culinary artist, social food activist, Chef Eli Townsend. You will find the Artivism podcast at the intersection of art and social activism. Artivism is executive produced by ArtUp, hosted by Linda Steele, produced, directed, and distributed by KUDZUKIAN.